Thank you very much, Pastor Peter. Evening, everybody. Um, we are finishing Hebrews chapter 11, Faith's Hall of Fame, this evening. Let there be light. And we've been going through Hebrews 11, and the author is trying to show these Jewish believers that the Old Testament was full of faith, and that more than anything, faith and trust in God is to be prized. Far better than the law is faith and trust. And so we've had a catalogue of different individuals from very different backgrounds with very different stories, from Abraham, the father of the Hebrews, to Rahab, the prostitute in Jericho, all kinds of people throughout Old Testament history. And we're finally now coming to the conclusion of it all. Let me share Hebrews chapter 11, verse 32 following. And what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak, Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouth of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, became valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of the aliens, women received their dead, raised to life again. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance that they may obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trial of mockings and scourgings, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, were tempted and tested, slain with swords. They wandered about in sheepskin and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts, mountains, in dens and caves of the earth. And all these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise, God having provided something better for us, that they should not be made perfect or mature apart from us. And so we see that he begins to bring a conclusion that is more general. It's like he was saying, the author of Hebrews, who was saying, it's like he's saying, look, I could go on. I could preach about all the heroes of the Bible, and each one of them would have a story of faith, and it's their faith that defined them before God. They're following him, they're trusting him, and they're believing him. And all these different people had different, unique experiences of faith. By faith, Noah did something different than Enoch. By faith, Abraham did something different than Sarah. By faith, Abel did something different than Rahab. By faith, Gideon did something different than David. And what this passage here seems to be saying to us is the uniqueness of individuals' by faith story, the uniqueness of it. And you see in this the first paragraph here, by faith, and it's all the victorious stuff, you know what I mean? It's all the Pentecostal charismatic stuff, subduing kingdoms, obtaining promises, stopping mouths of lions, quenching violence of fire, escaped sword, weak be strong, valiant in battle, turning the flight of armies of aliens, and receiving the dead back to life again. It's the Pentecostals, it's the charismatics on the move. And then we've got the next paragraph, which is very different. And this might be the more sort of evangelical take on things. The expectation of torture, not accepting deliverance, trials, mockings, scourgings, stonings, slain, poor, destitute, afflicted, tormented. And so you look at this, and what you see is God had a plan for each individual. And for some individuals, it was great victories. And for others, it was seeming defeat, pain, torment, scourgings, imprisonment, banishment to deserts, dens, and caves. But all of them are part of the faith's hall of fame. Those that brought the dead back to life are equal with those that ended up in prison. Every person has a unique, by faith, story that God is working through their lives. Yes, there's many similarities in the sense that we have the same God who's faithful to all of us, and we can trust in him, and he'll be there for all of us. But the path is different. You know, sometimes reading this passage made me think, sometimes you get Christians, and their sort of attitude is, if I was in the lion's den, just like God saved Daniel from the lion, he'd save me, bless God. Do it again, Lord. Well, would he do it again? Plenty of Christians in the early church were eaten by lions as martyrs in the Colosseum. And so it, for one was saved from a lion, and many glorified and believed God by being eaten by the lions in the Colosseum. Some women had their dead raised to life, others didn't. And so God is faithful, but what we have to understand is that we are unique. We are unique. We have a shared God, but we have a unique story. And our unique stories woven together in the local church become a local church story, and all the local churches put together become the great story of the global church. And so trusting God and believing God does not necessarily mean that you get all the positive things in the first paragraph. You might, and they're given as examples. So you might have mighty victories, but also you shouldn't think that you are a failure if you end up suffering, being tortured, persecuted, imprisoned, because God has a plan, and God can save and deliver, or God can be glorified by us trusting him in trials. So the big thing is to believe God whatever happens, to trust God whatever happens, to really enjoy the victories. I mean, I, like you, am a human being, and I'd like the first paragraph, all the victories. And I've seen some victories in my time, and so have you, so have you. But at the same time, I've seen things I don't understand. I'm wondering why the persecuted church has been persecuted for so long in certain nations. I'm wondering why, the church seems so weak at times in different nations and trodden on. I'm wondering why the enemy seems to get the victory at times in politics and society. But you see, although all these thoughts are important, what matters is faith. What matters is trusting God in the victory and trusting God in the seeming defeat, the seeming defeat. And so what I can say to you is whatever age you are, however long you've been a Christian, you have a by faith story. And wouldn't it be interesting if we took a pad and pen and wrote something to do with our story? By faith, Bruce, what would I write? The stuff I wouldn't put in there, stuff I wouldn't put by faith, stuff I might be embarrassed about, stuff that might have been unbelief. But surely, if my life is worth anything, I could put by faith, Bruce did this, did that, was tested here, uh, what a victory there. What about you? What about you? It might be an exercise that you might like to do. By faith, put your name and then look at your life with Christ and the areas that you've trusted in him in the past, the victories you've won, answered prayer, breakthroughs, but also the things that you have not had answer to yet, the ongoing tests and trials that maybe you're still going through. Because by faith, not only do you get the victory testimony, but by faith you get the perseverance testimony. You get the trusting God when you don't understand by faith testimony. Everything we do, everything we face, we can face by faith. And this is what the author of Hebrews is saying. He's saying, in the end, it's about trusting God, believing God, and trusting him that he has a life journey for us, and that at the end of it, we will have a testimony. And isn't that what it says here? Right there at the end. And all of these obtained a testimony. Don't we like testimonies? We don't give enough testimonies, enough genuine testimonies. There's plenty of people who can testify that they found that they were driving their car and God gave them a car parking place at Tesco's. All right, that's great, but there's more significant testimonies that people have to give, and I think maybe we need to train people to understand what their testimony is, and that testimony is basically by faith, by trusting. And so they obtained a good testimony, but they didn't receive the promise. They didn't receive the fullness of the gospel even. But there is. Oh, I've stopped too far. Let me just give me 1 second. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Excuse me. So, but the one thing in common with these that comes up time and time again in Hebrews 11 is this city that they're pursuing. It comes up 2 or 3 times. There's a city that they're looking for. It says here that the world was not worthy of them because they were seeking a city, the city of God, the city of heaven, the New Jerusalem. And that's what they were citizens of. And so they were all on a journey to the city of God. They were citizens, not of this world. They had separated themselves from this world and they were living by faith. So as we end this series on faith, again, what testimony can you say? And don't be overly humble. By faith, what have you suffered for God? By faith, when have you been persecuted? By faith, when have you had wonderful answers of prayer and breakthrough? By faith, what are you dealing with right now? And you say, what do you mean by faith? I mean trusting God, walking God's way, whatever you face, and growing in faith. By faith. In the end, all that will matter is then when we go into heaven and the roll is read of our life and all the unbelief and all that sin, I believe, will be under the blood. But what will God read to us regarding our reward? I think it will start with, by faith, Sybil, by faith, John, by faith, Peggy, by faith, Sasha, by faith, Bruce. And then what will be said will be anything in our life where we trusted God, because that's the only thing that's worth anything and worth a reward. So in heaven, everything else I believe is going to be under the blood. But how big will our paragraph be when God says, by faith, your name? What would he say so far? And what can you do right now in whatever situation you're facing to say, by faith, I have done this. And right now, by faith, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm acting. This is how I'm responding. This is how I'm praying. This is how I'm trusting. And if you get this by faith, then you will be walking closer and closer in obedience to the Lord. So let's go out and do things by faith. Thank you, Pastor Peter.